They called me a saint. For 5 years, that was my title. Saint Alex, the one who gave up everything, the one who was so good with Nana. But what they don't tell you about sainthood is that it's just another word for a cage, and I was the one who had to clean it. My day started at 6 a.m., not with the gentle, optimistic light of dawn, but with the shrill digital beep of an alarm clock that I had come to despise. The first thing I'd smell wasn't coffee. It was the faint, sterile scent of antiseptic wipes and lavender-scented lotion. That was the smell of my life. Nana, my grandmother, was a wonderful woman. Before the dementia took hold, she was the fiery, brilliant center of our family. But now, most mornings, she'd wake up in a state of quiet confusion. The first task of my day was to help her navigate the fog. "Good morning, Nana," I'd say, keeping my voice soft. "It's Alex. It's Tuesday." Sometimes she'd smile, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. Other times she'd look right through me, a stranger in her own home. Getting her dressed was a slow, delicate dance of patience. Her bones were brittle, her skin like paper. Every movement had to be gentle, deliberate. After that, it was the medication. A rainbow of pills sorted into a little plastic box, one for every day of the week, one for her heart, one for her blood pressure, one to keep the tremors at bay, and one to calm the anxiety that would creep in as the sun went down. I knew each one by name. I knew their purpose, their side effects. I was an expert in a field I never wanted to study. By the time we got downstairs for breakfast, I'd already feel like I'd run a marathon. I'd make 2 plates of oatmeal, exactly how she liked it, with a sprinkle of cinnamon and 1/2 of a sliced banana. We'd eat in a silence that was so heavy you could feel it pressing down on you. I'd sit there, watching the clock on the wall, its ticking the only percussion in the soundtrack of our lives. Tick, tock. Another minute gone. Another hour. Another day. The loneliness was the hardest part. The house was always quiet, filled only with the hum of the refrigerator and the murmur of the television. I was 30 years old, and my social life consisted of the pharmacist who knew me by name and the doctor we saw every other month. I remember one appointment, Dr. Evans put a hand on my shoulder and said, "You're doing an incredible job, son. She's lucky to have you." I felt a lump form in my throat. It was the most recognition I'd had in years. I drove home feeling a small, warm flicker of pride, but it was extinguished the moment I walked back into the empty, silent house. Evenings were the worst. Sundowning, they call it. As the light faded outside, the shadows in Nana's mind would grow longer. The confusion would turn to fear. She'd pace the living room, wringing her hands, asking the same questions over and over. "Where is my husband? Is he coming home soon?" Grandpa had been gone for 7 years, and each time I'd have to gently tell her, and each time I'd watch her heartbreak all over again. By the time I finally got her to bed, coaxed her into a fragile sleep, I'd collapse onto couch. The exhaustion, so profound it was a physical weight. My body ached, but my mind was the most tired part of me. This was my life. 7 days a week, 365 days a year, for 5 years. And my family? They were ghosts, present in name only. My older sister Olivia was the busy one, a successful marketing executive with 2 perfect kids and a sprawling house in the suburbs. I'd call her, maybe once a week, just to hear another human's voice. She'd let me talk for about 90 seconds before cutting in. "Oh, Alex, you're just so amazing," she'd say, her voice dripping with a kind of bright, performative sympathy. "I honestly don't know how you do it. You're a saint. Anyway, gotta run, conference call." Click. And that was it. Meanwhile, her Instagram was a shrine to our family. Every few weeks, she'd post a filtered, decade-old photo of her and Nana smiling in the sun. The caption would always be something like, "Thinking of my incredible Nana today. #family first, #blessed." The irony was so bitter it made my teeth hurt. She lived 40 minutes away. She hadn't visited in 4 months. Then there was my brother Leo, the free spirit. He was a musician, which was a generous term for a 32-year-old who was perpetually between gigs and lived on our parents' couch. The last time he visited Nana was 3 months ago. He breezed in, played a song on his guitar while Nana dozed in her chair, took a selfie with her in the background, and on his way out, he clapped me on the shoulder. "Hey man, you're killing it. Listen, could I maybe borrow 100 just till my next gig?" I gave it to him, of course. It was easier than arguing. And my parents? They were the architects of this whole situation. They'd have me over for dinner once a month, a little command performance where I was expected to give a full report on Nana's health. They'd listen with concerned expressions, nodding and sighing in all the right places. They'd talk about Olivia's big promotion, about Leo's artistic potential, about their upcoming trip to wine country. One night, I told them Nana had had a bad fall. I'd been up with her all night in the emergency room. My mother reached across the table and patted my hand. Her touch felt distant, obligatory. "Well, thank goodness she has you, dear. You've always been the responsible one." That word, responsible, it used to sound like a compliment. Now it just sounded like a life sentence. The final piece of this perfect family portrait was the finances. When Nana's mind started to slip, she'd given me her legal power of attorney. It was just a formality, a practical measure so I could pay her bills from her pension and savings accounts. It was supposed to make things easier. I never thought of it as power. I just saw it as one more task on my endless to-do list, another weight to carry in silence. I was the manager, the caregiver, the cook, the nurse, the saint. I was everything to them, which I was about to find out meant that I was also nothing.
For 5 years, my own dreams had been packed away in a box in the attic of my mind, collecting dust. I had a degree in historical preservation. Before I moved back home, I had an internship lined up at the Ridgeway Museum, a place I'd revered since I was a kid. It was a career path that required passion, not a hefty paycheck, and my family had always been quietly dismissive of it. But late one night, scrolling on my laptop while Nana slept, I saw an opening. Architectural archivist at the Ridgeway. It was the exact job I had given up. On a whim, fueled by exhaustion and a desperate flicker of hope, I applied. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to hear the gentle discouragement, the practical concerns. I just sent my resume out into the void and forgot about it. A month later, I got an email. They wanted to interview me. Then a second interview. Then the final round. It was a 2-day event. A panel interview, a practical assessment, a dinner with the department heads. It was in a city 5 hours away. This wasn't just an interview. It was an escape hatch. My one single chance to get my life back. I had to tell them. I called a family meeting. I sat them all down in Nana's living room, my parents, Olivia, even Leo, who I'd managed to drag over with the promise of a free meal. I explained the situation, my voice trembling slightly. It's just for 48 hours, I said, my palms sweating. From Friday morning to Sunday morning. The reaction was immediate and predictable. A collective... Olivia was the first to speak. Alex, that's wonderful, but the timing is terrible. I have that big presentation on Monday and the kids have soccer tournaments all weekend. My mom chimed in. And what about Nana? She gets so confused when her routine is disrupted. You know that. Leo just shrugged. Dude, I'd help, but I have this open mic night I can't miss. It could be my big break. I felt that familiar hot wave of despair wash over me. I was begging, literally begging for 2 days off from my unpaid 24/7 job. I pulled out a piece of paper. It was a schedule, color-coded and laminated. I had divided the 48 hours into neat, manageable blocks. Look, I said, my voice steadier now. I've planned it all out. Mom and Dad, you take the first night. Olivia, you just have to cover Saturday morning. Leo, you get Saturday afternoon. Then Mom and Dad come back for the final night. It's all broken down. Her medication times, her meal plan, everything. It was absurd. I felt like a child presenting a project to a board of disapproving adults, asking for permission to live my own life. After another 20 minutes of groaning and negotiation, they finally, reluctantly agreed. I left that Friday morning with a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. A wild, terrifying hope. I hugged Nana goodbye, her touch frail on my back. The first hour of the drive was euphoric. I practiced my interview answers out loud. I blasted music. I imagined walking through the museum halls as an employee, not a visitor. I imagined a life that was my own. The first call came at 10:47 a.m. I had been on the road for less than 3 hours. It was Olivia. Her voice was a symphony of manufactured panic. She began, Alex, you are not going to believe this. Timmy has a fever. It's 101. The doctor said it might be strep. I can't, in good conscience, risk giving it to Nana. I have to go pick him up. I am so sorry. My stomach plunged. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. Okay, I said slowly. Did you call Mom and Dad? I did, she said quickly. They're figuring something out. I have to go. Good luck with your interview. Click. I kept driving, a knot of dread tightening in my chest. 30 minutes later, my mom called. Her voice was thick with that fake, sugary sympathy she was so good at. Honey, we're in a bit of a bind. My father and we completely forgot about the Henderson charity dinner tonight. We bought the tickets months ago. It's for the children's hospital. We really can't just not go. It's for a good cause. We've been trying to get a hold of Leo, but you know him. His phone is probably dead. So you're leaving Nana alone? I asked, my voice flat. Of course not. We're running out of options. Can you try Leo? I pulled the car over onto the gravel shoulder of the highway, the roar of passing trucks filling the silence. I called Leo, straight to a voicemail that chirped, Hey, you've reached Leo. Leave a message, or don't. I hung up without saying a word. The predictability of it all was the most insulting part. My mom called back a minute later. Her voice was final. Alex, there's just no other way. You have to come back. We feel terrible, we really do, but family has to come first. Maybe this job, it just wasn't meant to be. And she hung up. I sat there on the side of the highway for a long time. The silence in my car was deafening. My future, that bright, beautiful thing I had dared to imagine just hours before, had just been snuffed out. It wasn't meant to be, as if fate had made this decision and not them, not their selfishness, their carelessness, their complete and utter disregard for me. Numbly, I opened Instagram. I don't know why, maybe for a distraction. And there it was, A new story from Olivia. It was a video. Her son Timmy, the one with the raging 101-degree fever, was sitting on their kitchen counter laughing, happily eating a giant bowl of ice cream. He looked the picture of health. The lie was so blatant, so shameless. It wasn't just that they had let me down. They had sabotaged me, and they hadn't even had the decency to craft a believable excuse. Something inside me didn't just break, it shattered, and the pieces rearranged themselves into something cold and hard and clear. The hurt was gone. The disappointment was gone. All that was left was a quiet, chilling resolve. I put the phone down, started a car, and made the U-turn. The 5-hour drive home was completely silent. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just drove. And I planned.
When I walked back into Nana's house that evening, it was empty. A single lamp was on in the living room, casting long shadows on the walls. Nana was in her armchair, watching a game show, the volume turned way up. She looked over at me, her eyes wide with confusion. "Oh, hello, dear," she said. "Have you been gone long?" My family wasn't there. They hadn't even waited for me to get back. They had just left her. That was the moment the last shred of obligation I felt towards them turned to dust. The rage I felt wasn't hot and explosive. It was cold, methodical, and incredibly focused. I didn't call them. I didn't text. I just went to my room and opened my laptop. I didn't sleep that weekend. My browser history became a roadmap to my new life. Full-time elder care services near me, live-in caregiver costs, transferring financial power of attorney, elder care lawyers. I was no longer an archivist in training. I was a strategist. The next week was a blur of phone calls and appointments. I contacted a highly rated home care agency. They sent over a counselor who listened to my story with a practiced, empathetic nod. I interviewed 3 candidates they recommended. The first was too clinical, all starched uniform and no warmth. The second was sweet, but seemed overwhelmed. And then there was Maria. She was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a firm, confident handshake. Her references were flawless. She had 20 years of experience with dementia patients. She came over for a trial afternoon. I watched from the kitchen as she sat with Nana, not just talking at her, but with her. She asked about the photographs on the mantel. She listened, really listened to Nana's looping stories. She even got Nana to laugh, a genuine, joyful sound I hadn't heard in months. In 3 hours, Maria had built a better connection with my grandmother than my own family had managed in 5 years. I hired her on the spot. Next, I tackled the finances. I sat down at the dining room table with 5 years' worth of Nana's bank statements and investment reports. It turned out her financial situation was far better than I'd realized. Her husband, my grandpa, had been a shrewd investor. Her pension was solid. Her savings were substantial. My family had been treating her accounts like a personal slush fund for their minor emergencies, but they had never bothered to look at the whole picture. They had no idea about the long-term investments. Nana could afford the absolute best care. She could afford a professional 24/7 live-in caregiver for the rest of her life and still have plenty left over. The solution to my prison had been there all along. It just required someone to actually look. My final stop was an elder care attorney, a man named Mr. Davies. He was sharp, empathetic, and had seen this kind of family dynamic 100 times before. I laid out the entire story. The 5 years of caregiving, the missed interview, the blatant neglect. He didn't even flinch. He just nodded and said, "All right, let's protect your grandmother, and let's protect you." We drew up the documents, a new ironclad contract for Maria, and a legal transfer of financial control. I was relinquishing my power of attorney. Mr. Davis's firm would now act as a neutral third-party trustee for Nana's estate. They would pay Maria's salary, manage the bills, and oversee all expenditures. My name would be removed from every single account. As I signed the last page, the pen in my hand felt incredibly light. This wasn't just a signature. It was a declaration of independence. I wasn't running away. I was delegating. I was finally, after 5 long years, doing what was truly best for my grandmother and for myself. I called the final family meeting the following Sunday. I used a calm, neutral tone on the phone. "I have an update on Nana's care plan," I said. "It's important that you're all here." They walked into the house with an air of wary self-satisfaction. I could see it on their faces. They thought they had won. They thought I had come crawling back, defeated, ready to accept my fate and propose some new, even more demanding schedule for myself. My parents had brought a sympathy casserole. Olivia was checking her work email on her phone. Leo looked like he'd just rolled out of bed. They sat on the couch, looking at me expectantly. I didn't sit. I stood. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice even. "I have an update on Nana's care plan." On cue, Maria walked in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She smiled warmly. "Hello, everyone," she said. My family stared at her, then back at me, their faces a mixture of confusion and suspicion. This is Maria. She is Nana's new full-time live-in caregiver. She's a certified nursing assistant with 2 decades of experience in dementia care. My mother's jaw tightened. Caregiver? Alex, we can't afford that." "Nana can," I replied smoothly. "I've gone over her finances. She's more than capable of covering the cost." Then I walked over and handed my father a sleek, black folder. "And this is the new schedule." He opened it. Their heads huddled together as they looked at the documents inside. I watched their faces shift from confusion to shock to sputtering, red-faced anger. Inside the folder was Maria's employment contract, clearly stating her salary and that it would be paid directly from Nana's estate. And behind it was the new weekly schedule. It showed Maria's hours, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. The rest of the time, every evening, every overnight, and every single weekend was divided into 4 neat equal blocks, labeled Mom and Dad, Olivia, and Leo. Olivia was the first to explode. "This is insane," she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at the paper. "I can't do every Tuesday night and every other Saturday. I have kids. I have a career." I looked at her, my expression unreadable. "I managed to do it 7 days a week for 5 years. I'm sure you can handle 2 shifts." My father was next, his face flushed. "And who's going to pay for this if we need more hours? What if Maria needs a sick day? We can't afford to pay for overtime on top of this." I gave a small, slow nod. "That's an excellent question. I'm sure the new lawyer managing the trust can help you with that. My name is off all the accounts. I've handed over complete financial control to a third party." I paused, letting the words sink in. Then I delivered the final blow. "I've also already packed my car. My lease in the new city starts next week." The room erupted. It was a cacophony of betrayal and indignation. "You went behind our backs. How could you be so selfish? After everything we've done for you?" I didn't engage. I didn't argue. I had already said everything that needed to be said. I just stood there and watched them. Watched them finally, for the first time, be confronted with the consequences of their own choices. I let them argue amongst themselves for a moment longer, then I turned and walked toward the front door. "For 5 years," I said, my hand on the doorknob, my back to them, "you all told me what an amazing job I was doing taking care of Nana. I've simply made sure her care remains at that high standard. You're her family. I'm sure you'll handle it." And I walked out. I didn't look back. I got in my car, which was already packed with the few boxes that contained my old life, and I drove away. I didn't check the rearview mirror. My new life started the next day. I called the Ridgeway Museum. I explained honestly what had happened. I told them I understood if the position was filled, but I wanted them to know why I had missed the interview. The department head was silent for a moment, and then she said, "Alex, anyone who can manage that kind of situation with that much grace under pressure is exactly the kind of person we want on our team. The position is yours if you still want it." I still get updates from Maria.
She sends me pictures. Nana is thriving. She has structure, professional care, and a companion who is paid to be patient and kind. And as for my family, I hear they've had to sell their second car and cancel their wine country trip to afford the weekend overtime for Maria. Apparently, responsibility is more expensive than they thought. They told me that my sacrifice was my responsibility. They were half right. It was my responsibility to finally stop making it. They wanted a saint, but what Nana really needed was a professional. And what I needed was a life.